Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks for having me.
You are a man that loves to investigate and dive into knowledge. You're big into tech and what's happening at the forefront. What pulled you into all of that?
It's true. It's true. I guess it can make me feel get me crazy sometimes because I want to know everything. I want to know how stuff works. Don't people want to know, like, how does a smartphone work? How does a self-driving car work? How are we going to put people on the moon? All this stuff. I'm just this incredibly curious person, and I can trace it back, through my whole life as a kid. And in a way, it's funny because I was a skeptic as a child around, stuff that kids believed in. And in a way, I kind of lost innocence because of that. If and I'll just say this lightly, I won't go too deep into it. When the notion of Santa Claus would come up as a 4 or 5 year old kid, I had questions. I was curious about the science. Perhaps I shouldn't have been, but this has been a trend through my life. And I think all of us try to go towards the things that we're good at and that we get credit for. And so it seemed like I was pretty good at tech at a young age. And as I entered the workforce, I was able to get results for my employers, and people, liked what I was doing. So it encouraged me, it incentivized me to do more. And through that, of course, my path got me deeper and deeper into technology and emerging technologies, and then the broader space of innovation. So today, I have such a luxury to be able to work with companies like LinkedIn Learning and other clients and partners to do this full time, to explore the technologies, current technologies, the possibilities of the future. And while I have a pretty broad purview, people will know me for certain topics like the future of cities, which, is a massive, massive topic. So that, it's not, I don't have a magical answer for you, but as I reflect on your question, that's what I think about.
It's pretty cool. So you're an educator, you're an author, you had your own podcast. So you're definitely out there exploring. So future cities, that's how you and I got connected.
Okay.
You're also really strong in blockchain as well, correct?
Yes. Yeah. And it came about, like many of the technologies, that I end up being a person who has something to say about and helps others understand, through being asked to be an educator on this topic. I was fascinated by cryptocurrency from day one, back to the original, Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto paper.
I was reading that this morning.
Isn't it funny how well written it is and how it condenses so much into just a few pages?
It's really impressive.
I read it regularly because I use it all the time in my classes and in my online learning and writing. And I'm sort of struck each time that I miss something, or whoever the writer was, because I guess we don't know who Satoshi Nakamoto is. They compressed a lot of thought into what others would take 5 sentences. They or he or she puts it into one sentence. So getting back to your question, somebody asked me, after first I was an observer around cryptocurrency, and then the underlying technology, blockchain. And I remember being in Austria, of all places, and I'm at an event, and there's the evening dinner when all the participants are gathered together and all the speakers. And the keynote speaker for the dinner was this lady who had started, and I'm going to guess it was something like Blockchain Germany, I think, or maybe it was like Blockchain Berlin. And she spoke about the phenomena of blockchain. And it was the first time that I really listened closely and had that moment of, like, this is really interesting and important. And after that, I got really curious. And then I was asked, would I be able to teach some people about blockchain? And that forced me to get into the topic. And by the way, I ended up creating a video course called Blockchain Basics on LinkedIn Learning, where I have a lot of online videos. And today it's my most popular course. On LinkedIn Learning alone, the new sort of the Microsoft acquired platform, it almost has 300,000 students. But if you combine that with the students I had on lynda.com, the predecessor for it, it's well over that. So it became a very popular course, and I got a lot of requests, and my level of participation in the blockchain world just grew tremendously as a consequence. And I guess through a series of events, I've become somebody who has something to say and can help others really appreciate the potential of blockchain technologies.
So I'm gonna guess, because you spend time on it, that you find that it's an important technology, yet it's complex.
Mm-hmm.
So why do you feel that people should spend time trying to figure it out while it's still new? Or do they need to bother? Or they can just let it mature like the internet did, and eventually they benefit?
Well, it depends on the audience. If we're talking about technology people, like technologists who work in companies, have work in an IT department or in a some sort of innovation group, I think there's a good reason to understand technology and emerging technologies. It gives you choices. It broadens your mindset. It helps you contribute towards conversations about how you might architect solutions. And even if it's not something that fits into a portfolio right now, just knowing its possibilities might help you consider it when the time is right, or when maybe a new product emerges or a new service, and you think, hey, blockchain could be a solution to this, or it could be the back end for this particular solution. So I think I'm always encouraging technologists to keep to cast a wide net on the topics that they should be learning about. You don't have to go massively deep, but you should go deep enough that you understand the concepts and the value. So that would be the justification there. Now, more broadly, you could probably argue that most people don't need to care about it the same way as most people don't need to care about a relational database, or you might buy smart technology for your home. My washing machine is connected to the internet now, and people have their they use Ring and connected thermostats and stuff. We know the value of it, but we don't know how it works. But what I mean is, most homeowners don't know how it works. They don't need to. They just need to know that it works, rather than how it works. If you are an aspiring entrepreneur, and you are looking for possibilities for building something that for the marketplace, there's always an element of value to being early in the phenomena of a new technology, because you got that first mover advantage potentially, right?
Yeah.
And you can create something unique, or even rethink how something is done. So there's value there too. I just think, stepping back for a second, blockchain as an idea, and of course it's not new to the world, and as of 2008, when the Bitcoin paper was written, this notion of distributed ledger technology has predated that, but the incredible magic of cryptocurrency, particularly Bitcoin, from 2008 onwards, we proved the value that blockchain was something important. But beyond that, though, as we discovered, I think the technology is interesting and important because it makes us rethink some of the fundamentals of computer science. We've for the last 30, 40 years, we've locked into client server architecture, centralized architecture. And while it served us really well, it basically created the modern world as we know it today. It turns out it has limitations, around security, around control, and so blockchain begins to address those in a very unique way, as well as introducing completely new ideas like the distributed autonomous organization, where there's no leaders. It's sort of a flat organization.
Can you
The
dive
idea of
into a little bit of that? Because that I find that truly interesting.
Yeah, it's one of those areas that is massively compelling. There's been some attempts to pursue it, but it still isn't something that you see momentum behind. But folks like myself who spend so much time in the emerging technologies world, when we see a spark or something that suggests there's more to this, this is worth spending time on and even investing in, we'll lock into it and sort of pursue it. And sort of DAO, or this distributed autonomous organization, is one of those areas. I mean, the way to understand it is, you think about the world of business over the last several hundred years. It is entirely based on human trust, first of all, that handshake or that signature. Look into your eyes and I say, I can trust this person. I'm gonna do business with you. That's the first fundamental. And then we have organized around a hierarchy, right, of leadership, of staff, middle management. We have workers at the bottom layer, who are actually doing the work. There's a lot of sort of global foundational things that we do that we take for granted, that has worked well, that we accept all the limitations at the same time. And so the question then becomes, can that be different? Can we organize people and ideas such that we, first of all, don't need to rely on trust, right? We actually can codify trust rather than rely on it as a human element. And secondly, do we really need hierarchy? Do we really need, fixed organization that exists, permanently as long as the business exists? Once you start asking, what are probably quite complicated questions like that, and you put in place a supporting technology, you get very different results. You get a very, very different outcome. So we're experimenting with blockchain, which is essentially this distributed network, right? Connects people in a distributed way, no central authority, no hierarchy. Everybody effectively is equal. Trust is codified. We call it trustless because it doesn't rely on trust. It relies on the code. And now you can think of an entity, I don't even know if that's the right term, as a way to operate and deliver some sort of product or service. And we'll see how it rolls out. It certainly is a fairer system. It is a system that has intense integrity to it.
This is because of the encryption, right? And you're removing a third party that has to establish trust, and instead you have a verifiable block of information that, if I understand it correctly, is proven out over the majority of a group, in this case CPU power. But because of the encryption and its re-verification, and that information is public, that's what establishes the trust.
Yeah, I appreciate how you describe that. Yes, is the answer. I don't know how deep you want to go into the tech, but what you described in that sort of high level technical overview is essentially the right way of thinking about it. And that's how it achieves that objective. And I think the other thing about these DAOs is they can sort of form and unform as needed. We don't think of traditional business like that. You think of a startup, a couple of founders get together, they hire people, they grow, they're successful, and they're around for decades. A DAO could actually function temporarily, could get disintegrated and then disintegrate as necessary as the conditions are needed. So it can sound confusing and in fact unintuitive to the listener if this is unfamiliar to you. But once you start to question traditional forms of organization, and particularly business organization, once you question the fundamentals of that, you say, can it be done differently? Then something like DAO becomes quite compelling.
I don't know if I read this, thought it up, or it's a combination of the two. Um, but when it comes to DAOs, I was thinking that you could have an AI create one, has a smart contract, which then pulled in workers that had specific skills. They would do the work, it would be verified, get paid via the blockchain.
Uh-huh.
Then that organization serves its purpose and then either disintegrates or evolves in its purpose, but everything's done by a machine, yet humans could benefit. Is that way out there, or have you heard anything about that?
It's not as way out there as one might think. And if again, I have to imagine, if you're listening or watching this, what you just said is mind expanding. It's like, what did he just? That's incredible. I think that's very possible. I think that is why we talk about the future of work being very different. What the fourth industrial revolution sort of tells us is that convention and history is sort of the historic way we've approached things is all up for debate now, and will probably experience radical change over the next few decades. So some people ask me about innovation because I've been in this space for so long. They ask to understand it, and one of the questions that comes up often is, why is innovation so hard? Why do we struggle with creating new value and then succeeding with that value? And there's many ways to answer that. I have one thought, though, that I think for me personally has helped me even process that difficulty. And that is, when you innovate, unlike other activities, you're actually developing ideas and creating things for a world that has yet to happen. And because you're actually anticipating tomorrow rather than reflecting what is needed today. And the challenge with building for tomorrow is we actually don't know precisely what tomorrow will look like. We don't know, what consumer expectations will be, or even consumer demands. We don't know the technologies. We don't know the political environments. There's a whole range of things that are just unknowns. So we're kind of making educated guesses on what tomorrow might look like, and we're trying our best. Some people are better than others. Sometimes we get it right and we make a fortune and we build an incredible business. So other times we're way off and it just fails, or we're too early, which is often the case. So as you think about preparing yourself with skills for tomorrow, or even thinking about the businesses that will be in demand and how they operate for tomorrow, we have to think much more differently. We take bigger risks and recognize what you just said, that the very nature of how talent is pulled together, applied to a problem, compensated, and then completed in that life cycle, that can be potentially run with artificial intelligence, independent of a human, and it all feels and sounds very different from how we do things today. But I think that's going to be pretty characteristic of the future.
From what you're consuming, researching, writing about, discussing, with the emerging technologies like blockchain, like artificial intelligence, and then looking at concepts of the future of work and future of cities, what are you seeing as some of the amazing benefits that stand out to you specifically that's good for humans?
Well, I've always looked at technology and emerging technologies through the lens of positive good, positive change. There's clearly people who see new technology and look for its vulnerabilities. They look to see how they can take advantage of others. That's the nature of humanity, unfortunately. So I tend to sort of look at something new, whether it's artificial intelligence, blockchain, or autonomous vehicles, or whatever the kind of the technology of the moment is, and say, well, how does it benefit us? How can we create better experiences for people? And fundamentally, what drives me around the future of cities topic is How can we increase the quality of life for the most amount of people around the world? Today, we don't live in a world that has good equality in that regard, right? The way in which many of us live here in the United States contrasts greatly with many cities and rural areas in the rest of the planet. I look to our challenges around cities. They're significant. They're intractable. They're large in their complexity and their impact. And I say, I'm not going to say, well, let's just shrug and say, well, there's nothing we can do. Let's just deal with it. Let's just, climate change, for example, it seems so overwhelming that you could get disheartened and walk away. But my position is, it's a big problem. How do we fix it? Okay, that's the conversation I want to have. Is, well, what do we do? What do we do? So I look at a whole range of existing technologies, and new ideas, and use that as the manner in which we sort of try to figure out how do we move forward. So, as we think about the future of the planet, the future of cities, and the future of humanity, there's certainly the question of energy. I think this is an incredible space. We are in the beginning years of an energy revolution, an energy transition from carbon-based energy, oil, coal, and gas, to things like solar, wind, thermal, and wave
Do you have a
motion.
sense of that timeline on when the renewables would intersect with fossil fuels and it would reach a tipping point?
Yeah, there's a couple of thoughts on that to kind of frame that a little bit. Firstly, the elimination of carbon energy is nowhere close. We are stuck with oil, gas, and oil for the foreseeable future. There's no exit from that. It's too cheap and too successful. We don't have an appropriate portfolio of alternatives that can 100%, 24 hours a day, pick up all our needs. There are some nations in the world, Costa Rica is an example, and even Germany's been successful on a few days where they have run entirely on renewables. But what we need is something that is reliable indefinitely. And the good news is, emerging technologies, new ideas, brilliant people, put them together with investment, and you can see changes that happens. Now, one of the ways to answer your question is, so first of all, there's that notion of a mix. It's going to be a mix, and it's going to be carbon and non-carbon. What's going to happen is you're going to see the non-carbon based energies make up a bigger and bigger proportion of that portfolio. So, you'll see over time, coal, gas, and oil diminish, not go away, and the others start to increase. And really, that's what it looks like over the next, by 2030, 2035, you're starting to see, the amount of new gigawatts of energy introduced by non-carbon massively outweigh that which is introduced in carbon. So by 2030, 2035, each year we're introducing new gigawatts, and here's a ballpark numbers just to kind of give you an idea. We may see in the region of about 60 gigawatts, new gigawatts of energy introduced by the carbon energies in the 2030 to 2035 time horizon. But in the renewables side, more like 250, 260 gigawatts. So what is that, 400% more energy being delivered. And so, if you extrapolate that out, plus bake in things like innovation in battery technology, which is so essential here, we got to have cheap, safe, clean batteries. That combined with renewables, as you get to the middle of the century and beyond, you could see just a trickle of power from carbon, but the vast majority being non-carbon energy.
I liked talking about the battery. Elon Musk was mentioning that the new Tesla battery can charge in about the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee, which is a massive improvement because we're so used to being able to pump and go. We don't want to have to sit around for an hour. Sure. So that charge speed is critical as part of that battery technology. Also within smart cities, right? So I guess we're talking access to resources, probably some autonomous driving. What other things are you seeing innovating
Sure.
in that space to make it a more holistic environment, healthy environment for humans?
Yeah. Well, look, one of the reasons I am so fascinated with the future of cities is not only is it a topic that's about social good, it's about humans and about quality of life, um, but there are so many problems to solve. It's a buffet for technologists, right? It's like, you know, there's no shortage of issues to solve. It's a remarkably long list. Um, I'd started a little bit with the energy side, and I was glad to go a little deeper on that. But you raised something like transportation. There's another of the sort of top challenges facing our cities. No question, if you've traveled anywhere in the world, any major city, you'll notice the traffic, right? Excuse me.
I live in Atlanta, so I can attest to that.
Yeah. Anybody listening to your podcast, pretty much from anywhere in the world, assuming they're in a city, can have empathy for the challenges of modern day transportation. So you got your traffic, your congestion, of course. You have accidents. 1.4 million people die in car accidents every year around the world. It's a huge unspoken tragedy. You have the carbon emissions. All the fuel we're using in our carbon-based cars are spewing into the atmosphere. And then even our sort of public transport solutions in many areas, they're not very successful or not attractive. And so, the current model is unsustainable. I guess with all of us staying at home for the last, at least a lot of us staying at home for the last 17 months or so, we realized how, overwhelming that is. That a life where you're not sitting in traffic for 1 hour, each way to an office every day is probably a better quality of life for most people. I know there's some people who missed it. I didn't miss it. So, I like working virtually or wherever I want to, if I can. I recognize that some people can't do that. So you see now a wonderful momentum around emerging technologies in the transportation space. Of course, electric cars, right? Electric cars is a big deal. That points a little bit to the carbon emissions problem, the fumes, the air quality issue. The big one, of course, is autonomous vehicles. And I strongly believe, by the way, that cars are going to drive themselves. And I think we know that because they do that already, but that eventually it's likely humans won't be allowed to drive cars. It'll be illegal, the same way as you can't ride a horse down an interstate here in California or in Georgia, if you want, but you can do
Maybe
it on.
Georgia. Depends on where you're at.
Perhaps that's true. You might get a ticket though if you might do it. You
Yeah.
might get a ticket, but you can do it on the weekend. Like you can go to a farm or a field and ride horses.
Absolutely.
It's a beautiful thing to do. But we made that transition. The world was, the New York City and London at one point were just full of thousands and thousands of horses and moving people around. And within a few years, a few decades, they were gone. They were absolutely gone. And so, my view is we'll see a similar phenomena around moving from human driven to computer driven cars. I don't know that we replicate it. Maybe we get a different model for how we move around. Cars going around in packs, or perhaps the vehicles are larger, and and what we do inside our cars will be different. Perhaps we'll sleep, or we'll watch movies, or we'll cook, or we'll do things that we can't even anticipate right now. So the model just shifts. You're seeing things like bicycles, right? Nobody thinks about necessarily bicycles as a innovative smart city or future city innovation, but particularly now during this pandemic, people have moved towards bicycles. Cities have opened up a lot more lanes and converted some roads, car roads, to be dedicated to bicycles. Okay, so there's transportation. I think some other areas, digitalization in general, is happening in cities. Far too much of current services are still paper-based. They're still show up in person. If you are there in Atlanta and you want to request your a copy of your birth certificate, I don't know about Atlanta, but it could be hard, right? It could be filling out paperwork. It could be showing up at an office. And so what people really want is digital services. They want to be able to do stuff conveniently, quickly on their smartphones or on their laptop computers. And so we see a real growth in the digital transformation of cities. This is for the most part, an incredible success story as cities show leadership and identify opportunities to convert some really old, ugly, complex analog services to a digital experience. And one other topic, just to allow us to talk about other things, I guess I'll just say is buildings. Is this topic of buildings? We need to make sure that we're thinking about the role of buildings in our world in a more refreshed way. And I'll give you just a few ideas. Number one is buildings, although we don't think about it like this, are one of the largest contributors towards carbon gas emissions. There are buildings that we've built over the course of the 20th century were not really built for efficiency. Often they were built to be low cost or just convenient or fast. There's a whole range of reasons, but things like energy management, clean, quality materials, the use of the natural environment, all these things weren't necessarily at the core of how we thought about all the buildings, the millions and millions of buildings we've built over the last 100 years. And so we need to, unfortunately, retrofit the vast majority of buildings in the world to be more in line with a healthy and better quality of life in our community. Some buildings will have to be torn down and rebuilt as sort of these modern contemporary buildings with our current understanding of what's necessary. We also didn't necessarily think about buildings in terms of connecting with how people move around and how you get people, how you accommodate things like deliveries or where housing should be relative to an office building, commerce, connectivity to an underground system or public transport. All of these things need to be rethought as it relates to our buildings. I'll stop there because I could actually talk about this for about 4 hours.
No, I really appreciate thinking about that thought. One of the things that it sparked up, I was recently in rural Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
And rural as in you drive 30, 45 minutes and you're still passing farms. And I was
I've
hanging.
experienced that.
Yeah, it's great. It beautiful. But in my conversations that I was having with people there, entrepreneurs, workers, they're many of at least the people that I was associating with, quite content with exactly where their life is at. Their internet speed was about 1/10 of what you and I are experiencing right now.
Mm-hmm.
But for them, it's good enough. Do you think that it's kind of a peer pressure thing as the metro areas expand and get access to more resources and see more benefit, that the community leaders in the more rural in I'm also thinking about other countries,
Yeah.
that they'll then want those benefits? Or is there going to be some sort of kind of like with you can't drive your car on the street anymore because it's dangerous? There's going to be some mandates, a blend. Have you had any
Mm-hmm.
dialogues around that?
Mm-hmm. Well, let's think about the big picture here. First of all, we are urbanizing at a remarkable rate. The current numbers are in the region of about 3 million people move into cities every single week.
Wow.
And these are again global numbers, not US numbers. We are building infrastructure the size of New York City every single month somewhere in the world. And by the way, we'll do that for the next 40 years. We're currently at about 55% of the world, somewhere between 55 and 60% of the world lives already in cities. That's in a world of 7.6 billion people. That's in the high 3 billion range, maybe even close to 4 billion now live in cities. And with the current rate of migration into cities, we're getting up to 70% of the planet being urbanized by the middle of the century and growing from there. Now, the world grows, we think, to about 11 billion before it starts to decline. And the vast majority of the world will be in an urban setting by the end of this century and early into the 22nd century.
Is this inclusive of the suburbs, or are we talking specifically within the urban center?
I think you need to think about it, including the suburbs. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that overall supporting community.
Yeah, the larger urban area, the traditional geographic limits of a city area. Yeah, for sure. There can be sometimes large empty spaces in that city geography, but it's largely encompassed in an urban environment and subject to all the benefits of urbanization too. And I guess you could argue, to be fair, that all the negative consequences. So to come back to your question, because you're asking a very important question about, I guess, the relationship between those that live in rural settings versus urban. It was important to say, to really set the stage that we are in a period of accelerated hyper urbanization, whether we like it or not. It's just the nature of what's happening. A lot of it, of course, is happening in Southeast Asia, where we see rapid population growth and urbanization. We're seeing it now in developing areas of Africa. Africa is transitioning very quickly into a developed set of nations. Many are ahead. A lot have to follow. But where we imagined and are aware of large areas and large countries that have historically been rural, even they're changing to be more urban focused. So it is the human destiny. It is where things are headed. Not everybody's happy about that, by the way, but I'm not making an argument for or against it. I'm simply saying what's happening, right? This is what's occurring. Now, that all said, America has largely been urbanized. I mean, you only have to go back to early in America's formation, and 96% of the country is rural. There isn't a lot of urban areas. There aren't a lot of urban areas in the United States. Now, fast forward to 2021, and the vast majority of Americans live in a city or an urban area. Again, we've sort of made the transition. The rural population of the United States is tiny today, is really tiny. And those people they've remained that choice. They're in terms of farmers and farming, it's essential, of course. And there's people who just say, hey, I want that life. I want that rural life. And that's going to continue. That's going to continue. You kind of raised it in your question, about incentives. I think the incentives really are the economic opportunities within cities, the access to healthcare, the access to, the internet, things like that, and education, I guess I'll throw into the mix, are superior generally in an urban setting. So there's a lot of advantages, but there's many people who can thrive and do thrive in a rural context as well. I don't see any sort of regulatory or any sort of framework in which we would force people or change that paradigm. I think people will make their own personal choices, and they have, relative to where they live. There was a very interesting conversation during the pandemic about will cities be on the decline because people realize they can work remotely and they don't need to be in the urban center, because that typically was where the good jobs were, and they would move out. We've seen a little bit of it. We've got these what do they call them now? The COVID communities or something is the name, where they've grown considerably because people have moved out of the big cities into these smaller kind of rural type towns and areas. But first of all, we're hopefully getting to the end of the pandemic, and in many cases we're going to go back to the way things were. Some things will change, but people are actually hungry to resume the kind of life that they had before in some respects. So even though it was a blip, the trend and phenomena will continue to be towards this rapid urbanization.
As we're dialoguing about it, I can see where worldview could impact. It's not a zero-sum game. So I could see where in the rural community, maybe they'll be slower to adopt a self-driving car because you still want to be able to cruise around in your pickup. Sure. But with ag tech growing at the pace that it is, and the automation that's taking place are taking place on farms, and then we're bringing in drones, so that's going to expand internet, 5G, et cetera. So automatically, there's going to be better access to certain things.
Yep.
Digital education, distance education, to that point. Being able to access maybe VR tools, AR tools that'll push out into those communities just through how their current community exists, while they may reject certain other things off the bat. So that could be, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Yeah. So it's conversations like these that I think I'm going to have to expand this podcast beyond our episodes. Because like you, I think I could definitely talk to you for 4 hours about. I thought we were going to have time to get into blockchain as well. So we're going to have to do a version 2.
Sure.
For the people that want to learn from you and consume what you've built, what are the sources of information that they can access?
Sure. No, thanks for the opportunity to share that. Well, I'll start with my book. So I have a book. I've written Smart Cities for Dummies, for the Dummies series. I don't be turned off by the title or the context. This is the book I would have written no matter what brand it was delivered through. I actually like the Dummies series. They've sold 250 million books, and they cover everything, every type of topic you can think of. But they're done in a way that makes topics accessible and actionable. So I've written the book. It's a bestseller. It's very well respected in terms of city leaders and those interested in civic life and in urban innovation. It's a book of action. It tells you how to do stuff, and it gives you examples. And so I think that's something I would encourage people to take a look at if they like this topic. I've written a book with a co-author about cities and the future of cities for kids. Nice. In fact, this one, it might be out by the time this podcast comes out, or if this podcast comes out relatively soon. It's due to come out, mid to late summer 2021. So that's called Exploring Smart Cities Activity Book for Kids. And I've had a lot of fun writing it. I had to write rhymes and things, and it sort of pushed me a little bit into areas that I was not familiar with, but that's what I like to do. So that seems to be in our pre-orders, and in talking about this new book, there seems to be really massive interest in helping our kids learn about the science of cities and what they can do about it, and the role of sustainability and energy management and things like that. So that's very much something I'm excited about. LinkedIn Learning is another place where I have, as we spoke about earlier in our conversation today, quite a large portfolio of videos, online live action videos about everything from blockchain. I've 4 or 5 now on the blockchain topic, including non-fungible tokens and cryptocurrencies and security in cryptocurrencies. I also have videos around digital twins and artificial intelligence, the 4th industrial revolution, of course, cities, and a number of others. So check me out there. Often LinkedIn Learning will make available my videos for free. And if you are a member of a library or a university, you already have access to LinkedIn Learning for free anyway. So it's very, very high quality online education. Other than that, I have a blog like a lot of folks, and I've done a lot of podcasts and interviews, and I do a lot of keynote speaking. Most of that you can find on my website, which is reichental.com. It's simple, just my name, REICHENTAL .com. And you can get me on Twitter. I'm very active there, at Reichental, very simple again. on LinkedIn, where I'm very active. It's been a very good platform for my work and what I do, and my network. So there's more, but I think that'll connect you with my ideas and my education, and even if you want to chat with me, that's a way to reach out.
And we'll make sure to have all of those links included in the show notes for the podcast and on YouTube. Jonathan, thank you so much. This was great. I wish we had the more time to dive into, maybe with the new book that'll be our gateway drug into a second conversation.
No question. I really enjoyed it too. I love your style. I love what you're doing here. I'll tell the listeners that, and the viewers, I actually didn't know the questions you'd ask, and I didn't know where we'd go with the conversation, but you did a lovely job of it. I like what you're doing here, and I'd be thrilled to come back and continue the conversation. So thank you so much.
Appreciate it, man. Talk to you soon.